Greetings, it's an honor to be with you today. And today I want to talk about divine order. Now, this one, and I'm expecting this to get a few folks up in arms, but I believe in divine order, so let's address it. Now, I'm reading from 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 3, and it says, "But I would have you know that the head of every man is Christ, and the head of the woman is the man, and the head of Christ is God." Excuse me. So let's get that out. Let's get that understanding right off the bat. The head of every man is Christ, and the key words they are every man, right? And then it says the head and the head of and the head of the woman, is the man, and the head of Christ is God. We're seeing an hierarchy here. We're seeing order, divine order, and I want to show you how that translates. All right, because I believe we can easily ascertain what's being said here. The head of every man is Christ. Every man. That's inclusive of man and woman. Right? But if we want to pinpoint, let's just say man. The head of every man is Christ. Right? To go further, we see that the head of the woman is the man. Next, and then it says, and the head of Christ is God. So we're seeing divine order. God, Christ, man, woman, and of course children right beneath that. That's order, right? We can obviously say that's order. Let's take it a step further. I want us to see how this translates as it relates to priorities. Because I believe that we must have our priorities in order. And I'm one that have found this out later on in life, that if you don't have your priorities in order, people will give you their priorities. Oh yeah, I think I need to say that again. If you don't have your priorities in order, people will give you their priorities, or they will push their priorities on you. Let's get to it. Okay, so I believe now, or I believe this to be divine order. Here we go. God first, family second, work third, and church fourth. Four things. Let's put them in order. God, family, work, church. Now I know there are people that may disagree with that, but if you appreciate what I read from 1 Corinthians 11 and 3, then you'll see how these things fit in the order. All right? Because, and now let me give you my simple understanding of it. We know that without God, we wouldn't have family. Without family, we wouldn't have a reason to work. Without work, we wouldn't be able to pay tithes and offering and give unto the kingdom. All right? So that's just my simple explanation, but I'm going to take it further. First of all, I believe the establishment propagates this order. I'm going to give you another order, and some of you are familiar with it, and you may agree with it. But I believe that this is an order that the establishment propagates. Here we go. God, church, family, work. The same four, but we've jumbled them into what I believe the modern day establishment is propagating. Once again, same four things, but notice it's God, church, family, and work. I believe that this is a problematic order. And here's why. First of all, God and Jesus and the church are not the same. Let me say that again. God or Jesus and the church are not the same. Remember, I read earlier that Christ is the head of the church. So how can we in turn lump God and the church in the same category? There are some people that see that, or they believe that God and the church should be synonymous, but the truth is they're not. They are individual things. God is one thing and the church is another thing. Jesus is one thing and the church is another thing, and we've got to understand that. I know that we're dealing with some difficult programming, and this is a stronghold for a lot of people, but I believe that if we reorder our divine order, we'll see some significant changes. So first of all, like I said, God or Jesus, whichever you decide to swap in there, and the church are not the same. Proof in the pudding. Here we go. Ephesians 5:25 says, husbands, love your wives as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it. Husbands, love your wives as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it. So right there we see that Christ and the church are not the same. Husband and wife are not the same. Now, when two people come together, two people, man and woman, of course, come together in marriage, they become one flesh. But they are still two different people that have decided to commit to one another. So, husband and wife are two different things. God and the church are two different things. So he says, we are to love our wives as Christ loved the church. In other words, the true love or the epitome of love for the church is exemplified in what Jesus did for it. And he expects us to make our wives, and what wives propagate. When two come together, there comes children, right? So, and that speaks to family. So he is saying, basically, I want you to love your wife, or I want you to love your family like I love the church. He didn't say love the church and then love your family. He says love your family like how I love the church. I wonder if you hear this today. All right? So right there we see the importance. So the will of God, next of all, I need to say this, the will of God and your relationship with God are intertwined. Now these are the two that are married together. This we're just talking about marriage. The will of God and your relationship with God are intertwined. They are one. They literally are one thing. They prove one another. And I'm going to show you scripture. John 14:15, one of my favorite scriptures about the matter. It says, if you love me, keep my commandments. Your relationship with God, you say you love him. If you love him, he's basing it upon fruit of love. He's basing it upon results. If you love him, keep his commandments. His will for you, God's will for us, is that we keep his commandments. Ultimately, that's what it's about. Before we get to the micromanage stuff, God's will for us is that we keep his commandments. Whatsoever I so commanded you, teach others. He wants us to keep his commandment. That's his will. And that is a reflection of our relationship with him. All right, I'm getting to my last scripture, Matthew 12:46-50. I need you to listen carefully. It says, while he had talked to the people, behold, his mother and his brethren stood without, desiring to speak with him. Then one said unto him, behold, thy mother and thy brethren stand without, desiring to speak with thee. But he answered and said unto him that told him, who is my mother, and who are my brethren? And he stretched forth his hand toward his disciples and said, behold, my mother and my brethren. For whosoever shall do the will of my Father which is in heaven, the same is my brother and sister and mother. A lot being unpacked there, but let me get to this. What Jesus is showing us is how there's a difference between the establishment. Although I have it listed as church, the church in this 4 category order is the establishment. All right? What Jesus is showing us is how the people of God become family. And we term them the family of God. So I don't want you to think that when I say church in this divine order that I'm referring to the people. I'm not. I'm referring to the establishment. What we've got to understand is when we have our brothers and sisters in God, they become like our real family. I wonder if you hear me. So let's look at the order again. And this is the real order. I'm not even going back to the other order because it's not important. Here is the divine order. God, family, work, church. So when you understand that the people of God are your family, when you see what Jesus said concerning his parents and his brethren that were out looking for him, he's saying, look here. Yeah, they my family, but do you want to see who's my true family? And he held on to his disciples. Anyone that does the will of my Father, they are my brother, sister, mother. So we've got to learn something. He was trying to show us priority. And I hope you understand, if you don't make your priorities, somebody's going to make priorities for you. All right? God bless.